about the main library, as well as our overall facilities master plan. Over the past 2 years, we have made lots of attempts to reach out to the community, receive input, and share information. We do continue to meet and update the community at this point in the virtual world, but just the last few weeks, we have done some general Q&A sessions related to the facilities master plan, and also had the opportunity to introduce design concepts for our upcoming Deer Park Branch Library, I think a week or two ago as well. We had a good attendance at that meeting too. This morning, before I complete my introduction, I do want to note that we are recording the session. So for those of you, you may want to turn off your video if you're not comfortable with that. We will also take questions in the chat. We have a lot of information from our fantastic presentation team this morning, and we want to give them the opportunity to share as much as they can in our limited time. But if you do put your questions in the chat, we'll try and get to them at the end. If we don't, we will follow up and also make sure that we consider those questions as we move into any additional FAQs following this presentation and others. As a quick review, this is all part of our overall facilities master plan, which I mentioned, and we work to develop that in collaboration with our communities across Hamilton County by engaging in a series of public meetings. Most specifically in 2019, when we started that, we did a meeting at each of our locations and also in a few other community areas, some focus groups, and attended multiple community council meetings throughout Hamilton County. All of this is, of course, made possible through the generous support of our local community who voted yes on a 1 mil levy in 2018 that is generating the dollars for projects across the county and the library system. We are building and renovating branches and also refreshing others. When it comes to the main library, which is the largest of our 41 locations, we have 40 branches and a distribution center, plus our main library. Some of you have heard us talk about that this main library accounts for about half of our overall public space. So we have about 1 million square feet of space, and about half of it is located here at the main library. Our team today is going to review some very high-level concepts and ideas that build on things we've heard about in the facilities master plan. And of course, I will offer the initial caveat that timing and dollars will really dictate what is possible when. So we're in the early investigation phases, but we really want to make sure that everyone feels informed, hear from our community collaborators as we go forward and enter what will be a multi-year project at the main library. We have several folks from the library in attendance here who will help with the chat. And I think we may have, I want to give a quick shout out. I feel like Diane Cunningham-Redding, who is our board president, is also, I think, in attendance this morning. So without further ado, thank you all very much. And I'm going to turn things over this morning to Dan LaRosa, I believe, who is from Group 4 and leading our presentation team.
Hello, my name is Dan. As Paula said, I'm part of the design team working with Champlin Architecture and MKSK Landscape Architects. I'm actually going to turn it over quickly to Jay to start the presentation, and then we'll be diving in and sharing the conversation about the potential conceptual design for the main library inside, outside, and the building itself. So with that said, Jay.
Thank you, Dan. I'm Jay Derenthal. I'm with Champlin Architecture. We are a local architecture firm, and we just want to welcome you to this presentation. We wanted to give an overview, as Paula said, of the work that we've been doing. We're going to be talking about some of the very high-level ideas that we've been coming up with. They center around stuff that we're going to be doing, looking at inside the library, but also the exterior. And then we want to have a bit of time for questions and answers in the form of the chat. So if you want to direct your questions and comments there, that would be great. So we wanted to start with the facilities master plan. Many of you, I'm sure, are aware that there were several projects that were identified in the facilities master plan for the main library. We, as Paula said, we have about 1 million square feet of building area in the overall system. and about half of it is in the main library. So obviously the main library is extraordinarily important, and you can see there in the box in red there, the dashed box. Those are some of the projects that were identified very early on in the facilities master plan as being appropriate and really vital, important to revitalizing the library downtown and really making it into more of a destination kind of place for Cincinnati. You can see there that what we had imagined was a small scale reorganization, about 100,000 square feet on the inside of the building, looking at the entire 500,000 square feet. Also, there were infrastructure upgrades that we contemplated. The upgrades to the electrical system, the HVAC. Those upgrades are in the process of being done as we speak, as well as the next item, which is the skylight and elevator replacement. Those items are also being done. The items that we're really going to focus on today are some of the very early conceptual ideas around the Vine Street Plaza and the new stairs in the atrium. So those are the two that will take up the majority of our time. I think it's important to realize that what we are embarking on is really a long-term sort of intervention and look at the library and what it might need into the future. It's a 10-year process that revolves around issue 3 that happened in 2018. And we, as Paula said, we want to make sure that we are doing things at the proper scale and at the proper time with the proper budget. And so the next slide, Dan, will show a little bit of our schedule and kind of what we're thinking about. You can see there down at the bottom, this is February 25th, the public engagement. We have already had a number of meetings that are shown there in blue that are some form of engagement with the public or the staff, the library staff. We've also shared with the Board of Trustees. And the dots, the orange dots at the top show sort of our timeline of internal meetings we've had with the library. And we envision that we will wrap up our study sometime in April. So this slide is really interesting in that it shows, it's sort of a graphic representation of the relative sizes of the branches on the right-hand side versus the main library on the left-hand side. So you can see that roughly half of the square footage is wrapped up in the main library. And so obviously it's a big building, about 500,000 square feet of space, building space. So it's critically important. And even though a great proportion of dollars from the facilities master plan were aimed at the branches, there's also a great emphasis that we want to place on the main library. So the next slide, Dan, we can look at some of the things we've already done in terms of adding functionality to the existing main library. This is a view from above, a diagram that shows in item A, atrium renovation. At present, we are looking at redoing the existing skylight. The existing skylight has been problematic from a maintenance standpoint for years. And we have been involved with a new design that will help to remedy some of those maintenance issues and, you know, give a new aesthetic feel for the space as well. Item B shows elevator replacements. So there are a total of 7 elevators in the south building, we call it, south of the building that's shown there, that the cursor is showing. So those 7 elevators are going to be modernized, which means that the controllers and all of the mechanism that improves the efficiency and the speed of the elevators will be upgraded. The finishes will be changed. And so generally speaking, they will help with the eventual movement of people, staff, and customers throughout the building in a much more efficient way and reliable way. We also identified a selective makeover, item C. That will not just happen in the north building, but that we'll be looking at the entire building for that. And then the last item, item D, shows a Vine Street Plaza upgrade. And we have already done a feasibility analysis of that. One of the issues with the Vine Street Plaza is that the elevated portion that was shown there by the cursor sort of creates sort of a small narrow channel that basically funnels people up against the building into the entry off of Vine Street, which is at times can be problematic. I think the thought is that we're not really utilizing that entire plaza as a way to access the library. I think that is something that we really have focused on a great deal that we'll hear more about later. Next slide, Dan. So we'll be looking, this is a view from Vine Street, essentially looking at the south building on the right and the north building on the left. This is a sketch over an existing photo that shows kind of the high level goals that we have for this design, which is that we want to make sure that we get more interaction between the exterior and the interior of the building. We feel like the exterior of the building can be viewed oftentimes as a fortress, sort of impenetrable. And we want, one of the high level goals is to make more transparency here into the library, more a feel of inside and outside being one whole, workable whole. And so we feel like lowering the elevated portion of the Vine Street Plaza will help to do that. There are walls now around the space on the north building that somewhat block views and inhibit people moving basically into the building there on that side. So we've looked at all of this, and we will get into some of that a little bit later in the presentation.
I think just building on that, J2, the presentation will be structured. We're going to look at the interior makeover. Then we're going to look at the exterior envelope, and then also the site as Jay was describing. But we're not looking at those pieces in a vacuum, just the way we're not looking at the physical improvements that are underway, including the skylight and the elevator replacements. But we're really looking at this as almost a master plan for phasing and then redeveloping the main library overall. And one of the things that we're all excited about as designers is actually you've got a real opportunity here. The spaces within the building are quite large and generous. And so through some relatively surgical interventions, I think that the ability to kind of transform the vision of the library while still maintaining that core working collection is certainly there. And it's in some ways a lot easier than trying to build a whole new building in such a prime downtown location. So with that said, we're going to jump to the interior programming and makeover. And Jill, if you want to take the lead, that would be great.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. Hi, I'm Jill Ayers. I'm a senior associate with Group 4 and have been really enjoying working on this project. One of the things that I learned when I started digging into the history of the main library building is that it was modeled after a department store like the one that's shown here. This was one that was built in Cincinnati in the 19th century, and that sort of big, open, wonderful space full of things that draw you in and keep you discovering and moving through the library was a big part of, if you've been in the main library, you can have that feeling when you're in there. Next, Dan. The building was built over time. Sorry, it's frozen for me, Dan. So, okay, there we go. Three buildings. We have the original building that was built in 1953, and that was added on to in the late 70s, and then the north building was added in the late 90s. That gets us to our 500,000 square feet that we see today. But over time, with the each edition, the building's gotten a little bit more confusing in some ways. It's a little bit disorienting. I still sort of get lost if I'm not following Paula or Justin or someone from the library team when I'm in there. There's some of the services have become a little bit fragmented from customers' point of view and also from a management standpoint. So, and then there's these staff areas throughout the building that have become disjointed from each other. So staff are working alone when they could be collaborating.
Thanks, Jill. And so as Jill was describing, as the library has continued to evolve from the original 1950s building, it's continued to maintain the same relationship floor to floor. So what we're looking at here is kind of a cut through the layer cake of the building. So there are 2 levels below grade with enclosed offices and stacks. And so then you've got your first floor and your second floor that are connected via the ramp and the stair. But before you make it to the 3rd floor, which is also public, has the tower room, there's really wonderful views. You've got levels C and D, which are visible through the atrium, but are those 2 levels of closed stacks inaccessible to the public, which really results in a discontinuity within the building and a challenge in terms of how to really move through the building logically and find different either materials or potential programs and activities. And this carries across 9th Street to the North Building as well. So one of the key challenges that we're looking at is how to start to stitch this building back together and take all of these wonderful large volumes and kind of regularize and make them legible for both staff and customers as well. So as we talk about that interior makeover, the goals and opportunities are really to reactivate and make that atrium occupiable, and not just kind of to bring light down into the heart of the building, but to create and organize program spaces around it in a way that you'll be drawn up and through the public spaces on the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd floor. And so one of the things that we're looking at to accomplish that is actually to integrate a new social stair at the 1st floor that turns into a traditional stair up to the 2nd and the 3rd floor. Which will also give flexibility in terms of operations and allowing people ways to, again, navigate the building without having to go through the elevators. And then also to create a well-organized working collection. So currently we have collections across all 3 floors, keeping the same number of volumes, but trying to potentially make that just, again, more browsable and active for customers, and then reconnecting indoor and outdoor experiences. So as Jay was alluding to in that initial sketch, connecting back to Vine Street Plaza is a really great opportunity, but also thinking about how we can potentially rediscover those public terraces on the 3rd floor that look both to the south and to the west. And of course, as always, the elevator improvements to increase capacity and equitable access for people who might not either be able to or want to use the stairs, because it is certainly, it's a 3-story building technically, but it really is 5 stories to make it to that top level. So then interior opportunities, what we're looking at is trying to build off of some of the excellent work that the library has done over the past year in the pandemic, and really look at the North Building becoming, on the 1st floor, primarily maker spaces that can connect to the outdoor space to the west on Vine Street. And then on the 2nd floor being public access technology, computers, things along those lines, which would then allow the South Building to become this multi-generational downtown branch with a host of special destinations that Jill will talk about more in a minute. And then here again, we've kind of cut that layer cake. We're cutting now through both the North and the South Building across 9th Street, looking to the east. And you can see here how we're really able to then kind of create a logic to the activities that occur in both buildings in a way that will hopefully allow that to be understandable from the street edge and from the site, so that people really know where to go from the outside, but also still connecting everything through the bridge across 9th Street on the 2nd and the 3rd floors. So Jill, if you want to talk through what some of those spaces are.
Yeah, one of the things I've been working on is sort of what goes in the building, right? What we call the building program of how the library will be organized, what spaces will be in it, what services will be in it, and how the customers will find it. So starting with that North Building that is reimagined as the technology and maker destination within the library. The Cincinnati Public Library's makerspace has been one of the biggest and best we've seen across the nation. It's really rich and vibrant, and the demand for it has only grown. So moving it down to the ground floor, potentially giving it access to the outside, will help boost it even more and make it even stronger moving forward. The technology center, that's something that access to computers, things that people have really wanted, not just the computers themselves, but help with computers, right? Because not everybody comes in with the same level of knowledge and understanding of the technology that they need to use. And then bringing the copy print facilities over there too, because those are very tightly connected with computers a lot of the time, and having that boosted support for those services. Next. And then, as Dan said, that south building becoming more of a sort of multi-generational branch library that feels much like you expect a library to feel when you go in. It has access to the wonderful collections, media, books, all kinds of things that you want to find, robust services for children and teens, places to sit and work or read, what really feels like a really truly wonderful library. Next. And then building on the suite of spaces that are already provided in the library to support even more opportunities for people to come together, to meet, to gather, for library programs, for community activities, for even social connections, all of those things that the library can really provide and improve in Cincinnati, Hamilton County. Those special destinations, things that like the Cincinnati room, currently up on the 3rd floor, which the library has been around since the 19th century and collecting all kinds of wonderful things about the local community and your history, and bringing those out into the light and celebrating them even more is one of those things that will draw people throughout the county downtown. Art is something we've been hearing about a lot in our conversations with staff and stakeholders and the public. The opportunity for the main library to become part of that downtown art scene, having the library provide spaces to help showcase that as well. And then things like destination gaming or other things that will make this truly a countywide destination. The main library is a place where you could still come in if you have a few minutes on your lunch hour or when you're driving through, to stop in and grab a book and check it out and run out quickly, or really have that sense of hospitality and welcome and places to stay, comfortable places to sit, easy ways to move through the building, maybe some refreshments, cafe, all of those sorts of things. So that's what we're looking at when we're thinking about the so-called building program for the new main library.
Thanks, Jill. And I think just to build on that, we always try to think about how these spaces will be used, and how the downtown library has that unique role as the main, that it can really be that civic commons. So while there's all sorts of obviously construction going on downtown, whether that's architecture or landscape in terms of the Court Street redevelopment just to the north, we're really looking at this as kind of a place for everybody. And so to that end, while we're going to look at some architectural slides coming up, it really is grounded in these program opportunities and activities that can be used throughout all of the public space within the main library. So with that said, we'll jump into a little bit more interior makeover and architecture. So when we talk about that atrium space, what we're really talking about, again, is currently it is somewhat of a blank slate in that you can go to the edges of the atrium, but you can't really move through it vertically. You go into the elevator. And so what we're looking at here is to really, from the moment you come to the building along Vine Street, that you'd be able to see in. And so by lowering that plaza, as Jay said, the goal is that we'll have a lot more transparency into the entire building. And so as you move in through the new front door, you'll actually be greeted by a social stair that's going to be really that type of flexible community space to hang out and gather. And then there will be a stair that moves again from the 1st floor all the way up through the building up to the 3rd story in a way that then really connects you back out to downtown once you get to the 3rd floor through those terraces. So you'll kind of move in through the building, have that interior wonderful shared civic library experience, and then out back to the city beyond. And what that does in terms of amenities is that we'll really be able to stitch together these moments of discovery on the first floor, the strong working collection on the second floor, and then places to gather and collaborate on the third floor as well, taking advantage again of the existing building, wonderful spaces such as the tower room or those terraces, and then infilling new spaces such as group study rooms, special destinations, other meeting spaces that don't currently exist in the main library. So with all of that said, that's kind of an overview of the interior programming. Again, we're creating this conceptual vision for the whole building, though that might, the actual implementation, as Paula said, will most likely happen in stages. So Jay, would you like me to speak to these slides, or would you like to speak?
I think it's important also to mention that because we have 500,000 square feet here in this building, wayfinding is always a concern. That's something that we always want to sort of try to make clear to customers who come in where to go to get certain amenities and programs and books or other materials that they want to find or other services within the building. So even though the building is relatively open as it is now, I think there's a lot we can do to make it more inviting, more open, and just have the flow of people be more natural. And I think that's really kind of our watchword. As you can see here, on the right-hand side, you see the elevated plaza outside of the south building there that Dan is showing with his cursor. You can see that it's a bit of an impediment from a visual standpoint. And to the right of that green space is where the entry is. And it's a bit of a hidden sort of pathway. And it's become a bit of a security question over the years as well. And I think safety is also uppermost in our minds. Whatever we do here, we want to make sure that we make it more open, more safe, more inviting for customers, a more natural flow. So those are the sorts of things, the high level sort of goals we have. And I believe that, you know, our early designs have really sort of been toward solving that, improving those questions. You can see here on the left-hand side, you can kind of see where the elevated portion is of the existing plaza as it is. And on the inside of the building, right next to where the elevated plaza is, there's a mezzanine as well, which is just an elevated floor. So both of those things together serve to kind of disconnect customers from a natural flow into the building. So we're looking to improve those things quite a bit. And you know, as Dan said, we're envisioning a new stair in the atrium space. And there's nothing more frustrating than seeing where you want to go, but not being able to get there immediately, like intuitively. And so obviously there are elevators, but it just feels like that is always something that we want to have available to people who want to explore the library and see sort of intuitively how to get to places. So that's something we want to reinforce. We also, as this slide indicates, there's a bit of a disconnect right now between the two plazas. The plaza that is on the south building where we have that elevated portion, and then also the plaza that's outside of the north building. So part of our goals there are to make sure that we have a connection between those two, that they talk to one another and you feel they're of a piece. So that's another high level goal that we have.
And I think just building off of that, Jay, the slide where we were talking about that this is really the integration between the interior programming and the exterior and site vision, I think is really manifest here where there was a good reason for the walled children's garden in the north building when the children's is on the first floor of the north building. Now that that's been transitioned into a maker space, we're really looking at a different opportunity to have the entire Vine Street frontage be intergenerational and approachable for everybody. And so I think that gives an ability that we didn't have in a previous the previous interior floor plan to really improve and create that cohesive exterior landscape experience as you're moving along Vine Street, and really to knit these two buildings together. And then I think just similarly, just to wrap up the conversation about the envelope, this conversation of how do we really tell people that it's a library? So looking at the C and D levels that are obviously an impediment on the interior, that's really where you have a lot of stacks. And so is there a way that we can use that canvas on the envelope to start to really tell a story, whether through words or graphics, that this is your downtown main library? And so one example that I thought was really resonant was from a few years ago, that there was a downtown art project that actually put text and language all over buildings. And the 1953 original main library had that anchoring the corner of 8th and Vine Street. And it just seemed very resonant as a way to really tell the story of the building on the outside from a variety of vantage points throughout the city. So with that said, we're going to toss it over to Rick at MKSK to walk through the Vine Street Plaza conceptual plan.
Thanks, Dan. I'm Rick Espy. I'm a principal with MKSK. We're the landscape architects and urban planners on the project. And just to piggyback on what Jay and Dan have said, there's a number of principles that have been discussed for the interior of the building. And you can see them here. They've been worked through with the Board of Trustees and maximizing access, that transparency that Dan and Jay talked about, customer focus, operational sustainability, industry-leading excellence, and diversity and inclusion are all pieces and parts of that interior programming that we've worked through. We recently did a similar exercise with the exterior, talking with the Board of Trustees and trying to come up with a series of terms and guiding principles. And you can see here on the left, those kind of top vote getters, if you will. The plaza wants to be inviting and welcoming. It wants to be flexible and inclusive. It needs to have technology and environmental sustainability, accessible and vibrant and artistic are thoughts that should be included within the exterior plaza. And always it needs to be fiscally operational and it needs to be safe. Primarily, that is one of the key stakeholders. And also it has to talk to the community. And so thinking about these guiding principles, we've started to look at the exterior plaza in more detail. We first start with kind of a global view of the plaza and what we're talking about. And what's really interesting about the library's location within the city is Vine Street is a major connective tissue that runs through the city. It runs all the way from over the Rhine district through the business center all the way to the riverfront. And that's a real advantage to the library in terms of their location. Next slide. As you can see here, that connective tissue that runs through over the Rhine to the riverfront is really pretty key. It becomes a major meridian as it runs through the city. And the next slide shows all the within a 5-minute walk of that spine, you get everything from the Taft Theater to the Convention Center to Washington Park in the over the Rhine district. So this is really a wonderful location for you. And what it is, it's about between Fountain Square and over the Rhine. It's about halfway on the distance between those two locations. And so that plaza becomes a real significant civic space as we look at it. And also just a block from the library, Court Street is being renovated today. It's under construction. As you can see here, the parking is leaving the middle of the street and moving to the edges, and it's going to become much more of a social street and a gathering street in its new configuration. As you can see here, Court Street to the north, PI Park to the south, and then the major plazas that surround the library, the Vine Street Plaza on the south and the north. As Jay and Dan have talked about how we want to connect those two pieces, as well as the Walnut Street Plaza and what might happen with that. But we also have to remember those terraces up on the 3rd floor and how they become an integral part to the overall complex of the library itself. For this exercise, we're really looking at Vine Street and the Vine Street plazas, and we know the existing conditions there. We know the access into the building to the north. We know the raised plaza that Jay has talked about. There's a bus stop on that location, as well as the walled garden to the children's garden. Next. And so the constraints, when you start to think about the movement of people through the city from a vehicle standpoint, Vine Street is a one-way street to the north, 9th Street is one-way street to the south. But because of the location and the close proximity to the street that the 1950s building has, you're actually, as you're proceeding in a car, you're actually past the front door before you actually see it. Similar to 9th Street, as you're moving westbound on 9th Street, because of that raised plaza, you're actually past the front door of the library before you ever see where it is. I think that we can greatly improve this by lowering that plaza down and opening things up. And also then looking at the North Plaza and removing those walls, opening it up, and really becoming a great civic space. Next. So thinking about that, you know, the corner, creating those visible sight lines into the building, moving the entry maybe a bay further north from where it is today, so you get a respite spot next to the library, the 1950s building, creating a big, open, accessible and inclusive plaza there at 9th Street, having that plaza talk to the plaza across the street on the north, so that the two are really integrated together. And then thinking about that makerspace and how that makerspace may spill out into that plaza for certain activities, and then kind of anchoring again with the respite space to the north. What might these plazas start to look like, and what is included in them? It can be anything from art that you see here in the middle to you know, fun, playful things like the swings in the lower left-hand part, being able to bring carts of books out into the plaza, have music on weekdays at lunchtime, creating activities for children, on whether it be chalkboards or other activities. I think all these things really want to be thought about and how they can be included in the plaza itself. Next. Art becomes really important, those book activities, creating shade. This is a west-facing plaza, so creating areas that are sunny and shady is important, and creating that art that really becomes a vibrant space for the city. And that makerspace, thinking about how that may start to spill outside. Are there activities that happen inside the building that can come outside, whether it's in the makerspace or in the main plaza? But really starting to engage the public in those activities, I think, is very important. And respite spaces. We all want spaces that we can sit, read a book, have a quiet lunch, and really thinking about how and where those spaces may occur in that Vine Street setting. Is it something that's very artistic, like the red benches on the right-hand side, or is it just a quiet sitting areas in the center image? Thanks. So we start to envision what these plazas might start to look like. And thinking that on this one, you'll see on the South Plaza, the entry has moved one bay down. We've got that respite space adjacent to the 1950s building. Maybe a major piece of art that starts to connect the two plazas back and forth, changing the pavement of 9th Street so that the two plazas actually do read back and forth. Thinking about a lawn area for activities like movie nights or art fairs and things like that, and how that great open plaza could start to change over time or at different weekends for those different activities. And then those respite spaces and basketries and quiet spaces that you can sit and relax. Some 3D views of what that might start to look like. Sometimes it's hard to read plan views. So here, thinking about that art piece and how that might start to dominate the view and become the iconic element within the plaza itself, but opening up that view to the front door so that from the street, you actually see where that front door is. Bringing the glass of the building down to to the plaza level. Currently, that raised plaza turns its back on the library itself, and so creating that glass all the way down to the plaza level and opening up those views. Having a cafe space that may stick out on that northwest corner or northeast corner of the building. Here you see that cafe space in the foreground, and how you might be able to get a cup of coffee inside and move outside to sit in a nice, sunny day in the spring. That art connecting through, but also creating that flexibility for those many other activities that could occur in this plaza. Thanks. And then on the north side, thinking about that colonnade that exists and how that makerspace can start to spill out adjacent to the building. That great lawn area that provides a lot of opportunities for children's activities, as well as movie nights and other things, where the plaza really connects the two spaces together. It becomes that great civic space and great entry into your buildings. Next. And then thinking about those third floor terraces that we talked about, they're actually, some of them are very large. They're over 140 feet long on the south side there along 8th Street. And what those spaces might start to become, how they might start to be, in an outward view of what's happening inside the building. Some of those views, it could be, next slide. Everything from, active spaces where you've got seating and bars and areas where you can plug in your computer and study, to something that's maybe more planted and more lush green. Is there places up there for children to have a little story time? Is there ability to spill out from a meeting that's happening in the tower room to actually spill outside? I think all those things are real opportunities and could really become an additive asset to the library itself. And with that, I'll turn it back to Dan and questions and answers.
Well, thank you very much, Rick. Justin, did you want to moderate the Q&A or any comments?
Yeah.
We wanted to open it up.
Sure. Appreciate everyone for coming this morning through this presentation. We are at the point where if you do have any questions or any comments you'd like to share, we'd love to hear. I have been looking at chat. I haven't seen any questions in there. So I do know it's a lot of content and it is, somewhat early in the morning. So yeah, if anyone has any questions, we'd love to hear it. If not, we certainly can give people back some time in their day. Oh yes, thanks Paula. I didn't introduce myself. I am Justin Rampa. I am your customer experience manager. Okay, thank you. A lot of really good ideas. I can see a lot of thought has gone into this. It is exciting. Yes, it's exciting for us. So thank you, Mike. So Lisa asked, will some places have naming rights? That's a good question. And I don't know that I necessarily have the answer for that. Paula, I saw that maybe you have something.
Lisa, that's an excellent question, and certainly something our intention would be to offer opportunities like that to folks. We haven't done a lot of building here in the last couple of years outside of 3 branches that you may know, St. Bernard, Reading, and Clifton. So we actually, following this meeting this morning, we've been meeting with many different groups, public as well as specific stakeholders. Our development director has a group of folks that we're meeting with just following this and giving basically the same presentation. And I think that question will come up there. So as we move into something like this, I do anticipate opportunities deeply and seriously being explored to offer folks the opportunity to participate in a variety of ways. And naming rights is certainly something that other libraries have worked on too. So I can't confirm exactly what it would look like, but we appreciate that question. And I think you aren't the only person that would want to know the answer to that as well. And I hope that indicates excitement, because I think people are going to get excited about this and then see how they can participate. Yeah, exactly. A music hall. And I think that's a great example of how a traditional space that carries a great spirit for the city and for downtown has moved forward, but kept the spirit of that space. And again, People were excited and they wanted to be associated with that. So that's a great question and a good point. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think it was kind of hinted at in the presentation, but we are very excited because, you know, this is a really for many of us in the history of this library, it's a once in a generation opportunity to really have some impact. So it's very exciting to be part of this history.
And
Anybody else?
Speaking of the history, just to give everyone a little bit more time, again, if you don't have questions, that's okay. We're going to continue the dialogue. But as Justin noted, you know, I grew up in Cincinnati, used the main library as a kid. My dad would drive me down, we'd find parking. Many of the things we talk about here are things that I experienced well before I became a librarian or a library employee. So I think when we think about the space and how to activate it, it is a unique opportunity. Parts of this building were really built when information was different. You remember the giant card catalog that used to occupy that area in the atrium, really kind of where we're talking about that social stair might be. That was huge and really important, and people used it. It was incredibly effectively designed for that purpose, but that purpose is gone. Information is different. So I think the question here in the chat really brings that forward, the idea of considering a major book festival. You know, we do have Books by the Banks, which is a festival that we do not here at the library because we don't really have the space. So how might we be able to tie those kinds of opportunities back to space that is designed for the social element of sharing literacy, sharing information? Those are the kinds of things we're looking at. So hopefully we'll have those opportunities for major events like that and have them more connected to the library. We support them, but how can we really bring that forward if the library here is designed to support that kind of use rather than use that was important, but that's been decades since we needed things like a construction to house information and card catalog.
Yeah, and many props to Lisa for knocking out of the park with questions. And just trying to add a little bit to that too, the Books by the Bank is really a group effort. So I think we also, a lot of this design process is really trying to figure out how we can connect the community. Personally speaking, I always, you know, the question I ask myself every day is how can we be more like Edinburgh? And, you know, they started the Fringe Festival, which Cincinnati has a Fringe Festival that has started as a result of that. So yeah, I think there's some exciting opportunities, particularly once we kind of get a handle on what space we could have and how we could kind of support some efforts that are ongoing and maybe create some novelty experiences, which would be cool.
I think to build on that from a design perspective as well, I mean, those types of book festivals and author speaker series, things like that, there isn't necessarily a space in the library right now that has kind of the ability to do author events, right? That can be kind of independently accessed and have kind of a pre-function space and then go into that kind of more formal event. But you all have, you know, really a incredible amenity in that you have the space to do those types of things. And so as opposed to a lot of libraries and a lot of downtown libraries that don't necessarily have enough square footage, you have quite a lot of square footage. And so it becomes more about how to reorganize and kind of inject those types of architectural spaces that will provide you with the program opportunities in the future to do things like book festivals and speaker series and things like that.
Yeah, and I think the demand is there too. I mean, I don't know if anyone on the call maybe participated when Bill Nye came to visit or have seen those pictures, but it did look a little like Coachella in just how many people had attended. And so I think we're trying to kind of really, as Daniel said, you know, really be smart about how we can utilize our space so that we have some more, you know, capacity to really host some really, really awesome events and make, you know, this main library a destination for the community. Any other thoughts, comments? Doesn't have to be questions. If you're excited, we'd like to hear that. If you have concerns, we're also, you know, want to hear that too.
And Justin, are people able to unmute themselves? Do they have that option?
I think that I don't recall setting it up so people couldn't unmute themselves, but but please let us know. I think you might be able to see that in the host if you click on this. Yep.
Yeah, it looks like people can unmute.
And again, this is not the last time we'll talk to you. We just want to make sure that you feel connected, and this past year has been kind of difficult to make sure everyone is aware of everything. So it's a chance to touch base and let you know where we're investigating the options for moving forward.
We did just get a great question from Stephen Rosen. Besides the meeting rooms, what about a raked auditorium for multimedia events? It has been considered. Paula and Justin, do you all want to talk about the Walnut Street framework?
Sure, thank you. Currently, we are focused on Vine Street. It does require us to have a phased approach because of the way the funding works. And also, as Rick and Dan and Jay had mentioned, the orientation of what is going on here in downtown at the moment has a lot of connection to Vine Street. So at the moment, that is where you would likely see the more immediate work, but that Walnut Street side does provide a lot of opportunities. When we talked in 2019, Justin and I, and actually some other folks on the call, went out and did a lot of work around raising awareness. And you can look at the original facilities master planning document that is on our webpage and see that Walnut Street does contain a sort of placeholder concept around an auditorium, as well as some other things. So certainly that is a space that we feel we could activate with more intention and to more benefit for the library and the community. And the auditorium idea is one that is definitely in that. It just may not be something that we're looking at immediately due to the Vine Street need and the need for phasing. But yes, absolutely, we appreciate that. And the idea of an auditorium in some form, maybe as you're saying, particular focus on multimedia, which does seem like, you know, a forward-looking way to consider the auditorium is important for us too. So we are capturing these comments and questions and appreciate that people bring them forward. So if we can't do or consider them immediately, we do want to make sure to have captured that input and idea.
And in terms of when we were looking at the FMP as well, that I probably spoke too soon saying that you all have a lot of square footage and a really good building to work from. The one thing that's hard to do with an existing building is a raked floor auditorium, because everything from the access needs to the structural requirements are tricky and have to be engineered in terms of clear spans, which the current building, while very flexible, does have a very rigid column grid, which makes it trickier. So I think in this first conceptual vision, we're looking more kind of flat floor auditorium and meeting spaces. But again, with the notion that, as Paula said, in future phases, there would be that opportunity when there might be new construction. Which certainly makes a raked floor auditorium, I think, just a bit more manageable in terms of construction and design.
I think this question also speaks to what we might re-envision the atrium space being as sort of a center for discourse and public address in some form or fashion. The social stair provides not exactly what you're saying, not exactly a raked auditorium, but it does provide some functionality in that regard for the atrium space. And we are envisioning an adjacent enclosed space that would be more along the line. It would be flat floor, but it would be for multimedia events, sort of medium scale gatherings and presentations of that sort. So it's not exactly the raked auditorium, but it's sort of a way to sort of help give increased functionality to that existing space, which right now is very difficult. It's a large space, but it doesn't really have a focus. And so perhaps the social stair is an idea that would enliven that space and give it the functionality you're really talking about, Stephen.
And if anyone has not seen the plan that Paula referenced, I did include a link to kind of our next generation website, which has comprehensively a lot of the updates we're trying to share. So the facilities master plan, which is kind of the large document laying out the next 10 years. But additionally on that page, on the left side of the screen, you'll also see kind of a breakdown of future projects, current projects. So that will be the place to go for, progress on the main library. We're also working on the Deer Park. Paula mentioned we had that meeting not too long ago. Oh, and then Paula just included a message in there for you as well. Any final questions before we head off? Again, appreciate you all attending so much. As Paula said, we really are trying to engage with the community as much as possible. A path we started on really in 2019, and we've had to pivot and kind of figure out how to continue to make progress on this facility master plan and engage, with kind of operating a pandemic. So we appreciate you adding a one more Zoom call to your day and engaging with some really great questions. If no one has any further comments or questions, then we wish you well. Thank you, and we will see you at the next engagement.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks all.
Thank you.